Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm here again. You've seen me twice in the space of an hour, welcoming Jamie Cooke. But I believe first we have a trailer.
There's a glorious world out there, waiting for you.
Are you in?
It's time to go big or go home.
Let's do this! Whatever you can imagine, I can create.
Whoa! You can go anywhere. Another universe.
That is gold!
I'd fight to save this one.
Yes! Oh, yes!
That's what we came here for.
Now, pour the pièce de résistance.
Absolutely stunning.
It's a very sweet way of life. It's la dolce vita.
A new Olympic record. But what a moment for these athletes.
I'm going to build something bigger, faster, wilder.
There's no moisture there, there's no tears there, he's faking it.
It's like, wow, look at that.
They're happy, I'm happy, what more could you want?
How can we love someone that we've never met? Don't worry, we'll look after you, I promise.
Look at that. Something is sitting there. Oh my God!
It is nothing short of remarkable.
Welcome to CNN Newsroom. I'm Max Foster in London.
We're about to see something that's never been seen before.
And liftoff of Artemis 1.
Are you saying yes to this dress?
I'm saying yes to the dress.
Yeah!
Kim Kardashian filing for divorce.
We got the power!
You're in your happy place already.
Very, very happy place. We got the power! Let's go now! We got the power! Toss the lightning!
And just like that, we are going to have to bring it. A new chapter begins.
Real eclectic mix of what you guys have on offer. But I think there'll be a lot of people here who'll be really keen to hear what you've been up to over the past year or so since you took on the post. You have a really vast region to cover. There's been a merger, clearly, that you've been shepherding that region through. So maybe, first of all, let's talk about what you've been doing for the past year or so.
Okay. So we merged, I had my role about a year ago now, although there was a period after that, which I call like the phony war, if you like, because we had a period of time where we couldn't really do anything. We were figuring out what teams we were going to put in place. So really, I think the kind of combined company, at least from my business perspective, kicked off in January. I think that on a good day, I feel like really proud of all the content we're creating. I think the success of The Last of Us, Succession, it's like the thing I had to keep. I didn't watch it for a week, so I had to keep away from all screens and not get spoilers. So I think Succession, I think some of the movies that have come out really show what the combined company can be. And then there's things like Hogwarts Legacy, which has sold sort of 50 million units. So there's a lot of stuff that we're producing that I think really gives us momentum. So I think that's been one part of the story. I think the other part of the story is that, and it's like this with any merger really, bringing teams together, making some really tough decisions. I found that particularly challenging because you're having to make decisions on, frankly, whether people stay or go in certain roles as you bring companies together. When you don't really know them that well, you have a very short space of time. So on the one hand, I feel like we're gaining a lot of momentum. We've signed a lot of new deals, a lot of great content. But the hard work is the culture side of it. I think the adage that culture eats strategy for breakfast is very, very true. And trying to set up the teams and getting them working together and holistically has been the real challenge.
Was there anything? Do you feel like there's anything that you would have done differently had you had your time again, or I guess it's you're almost thrust into a situation where you have to make a lot of these quite quick-fire decisions?
Probably just spending more time with people. I mean. I don't know if you can ever spend enough time getting to know people and understand people. The thing that really surprised me, if you like, because I'm from the discovery side of the business historically, and the thing that surprised me, when we hear about it being a merger, it's not a merger of two companies. And so this was a big surprise to me, because inside Warner, there are essentially like 7 different companies. You have the CNN business, you have the games business, theatrical business, Turner business, HBO business. And they'd only started that journey a couple of years ago in COVID of starting to bring things together. So that was a real kind of surprise to me. So I think I would probably spend a lot more time, with all the different divisions. But at the same time, I think, sometimes spending so much time reduces your capacity to make decisions. You can get cloudy and foggy with almost too much information sometimes.
Of course, yeah. So you're UK based, but your gamut covers from Central and Eastern Europe, where we are now, to Turkey, to the Middle East, and I wondered how much time you're spending in all of these different places, and like how you are able to divide your time up. It must be quite challenging.
If you ask my wife, badly.
She's the next one after.
So I think one of the first things we did was a kind of prioritization exercise. It might sound a bit boring, but it's really important to sort of understand where the biggest bits of your business are, where your important levers are. So you have to prioritize. So I think that was the first answer to your question. So there are several places where I make sure that I'm heading and talking and spending time with. That's dictated, as I say, by revenue, but also where the teams are. As I said earlier, it's all about bringing the teams together. So you need to try and spend time in the places where the people are, basically. And
you quite enjoy that, right? I think, again, we were speaking before this, and you were saying about how much you relish the opportunity to bring cultures together in that sense. Why do you enjoy it, and how do you go about it?
That's quite a philosophical question.
Yeah.
So I studied archaeology at university. So I have a very active interest in history, and the way that people interact to get things done throughout history, and the fact that people say that history kind of repeats itself. I think it actually rhymes rather than repeats itself. So you see sort of echoes. And so for me, I think that's where the origin of like bringing teams together and understanding people, understanding what motivates people, why people are doing certain things, I guess has always been in my nature. My background is HR as well, so there's another layer to that. And so a lot of my time has been spent sort of working across EMEA in the discovery world, bringing teams together, creating culture. And at the end of the day, I think that is what ultimately drives a business. You have to believe in and want to be part of something. And that's been a big conversation and driver for the merger in a way, because, as I said, there are so many different sections inside the business now. And the real trick is how we glue them all together. So how you can take a piece of IP that starts off life in theatrical, and how you can then migrate that to streaming, and how that can then find its way to pay TV, can find its way to linear, find its way to AVOD, find its way to fast channels eventually, all while you're selling consumer products around that. And Warner have done a lot of that, but there's a lot more to be done. And so creating that ecosystem is kind of the key thing. And I think without the people to do that and the right mindset, it's just not going to happen.
Let's talk a little bit about originals. It's interesting, you were listing some of the originals at the start of this conversation, but you're talking about the big American hits, the Successions, the Last of Us's. But I'm keen to know a bit more about your original strategy in terms of shows that are coming out of your region. Okay. Obviously, it's a little bit the Max streamer, the newly rebranded Max streamer, is soon to launch, so that there's obviously a period of flux at the moment. But could you kind of detail your original strategy specifically for the region you look after?
Sure. I think I'd like to start with general strategy before we get to content, because I think it's important. So the way that I see, particularly Central Europe, I think Middle East is a different ballgame, but we'll focus on Central Europe. My belief is that from a consumer perspective, there is probably space for 3, maybe 4 streaming products or media products. So I think one of those is definitely going to be a local product. I think one of those is probably going to be Netflix. And so then the question is, who is the third one, or the third and fourth one? Now, I think we believe we're well positioned for that because we have the breadth of content. So why do I talk about that? Because I think it links to the content strategy. Because if you think about that mix, I'm a great believer in the markets kind of moving together with our clients. So it's kind of, we create like a beneficial business for all of us, right? And so I feel like actually the local players have the local covered, right? we have the global content covered, but there is a sweet spot in the middle, which kind of is where I think we're heading from a content strategy point of view in my markets, which is content that can travel. So it's locally relevant, made in the region, but can travel. So I guess the most recent example of that, which was nominated at the Berlinale, is Spy Master. So this is a Cold War era espionage thriller coming out of Romania, but it's 65-70% in English. It has an international cast, and it's early days, but we're seeing some good traction on that in the region, particularly Romania, but then outside into the US, into all the Max markets. So I think that's like the holy grail for the international players like us. That's how I see it. The other thing I would say is that we are, I know we've reduced on the link to that, and obviously because of restructuring and costs and all the rest of it, we've reduced the amount of scripted drama that we're doing in the region, but we're still very active in the non-scripted space. So in the region, we're producing sort of 9 to 10 documentaries per year, and they tend to be topics that are pushing the boundaries, particularly around LGBTQ+ issues. We have a couple in Poland that are coming out. We have one premiering at the Transylvania Film Festival next week around a Romanian guy who converts to Islam and the impact and the story around that. So I'm a great believer in that being a focus for us, while you then have the international content really coming over the top of it, plus peppered with some things that we think can travel. But it has to be smart. We can't, there's not bottomless pits of money. We have to invest smartly in content that we think can travel.
Yeah, and you've got the new documentary about the Finnish Prime Minister,
yes.
Essentially the former Finnish Prime Minister coming up. So, how's that all looking?
I'm really excited about it, because I think that it's those kind of topics that I think that HBO can do really well. It's not just the scripted; it's the HBO documentaries and the quality they bring and the awards they bring and the buzz they bring that are really important. And for me, it's all about shining a light on topics that people need to know about, right? That are impacting the world. That feels really important to me in our content strategy going forward.
And how is the local production community receptive to this? Like last year's Series Mania, HBO Max commissioning editors across Europe were out in force, and then several weeks after there was a change in strategy, and lots of commissioning and lots of local production ceased, and quite a few people lost their jobs, which is understandable. There's a lot of redundancies taking place across the sector. But since then, is the local production community, you think, quite receptive to how you've just detailed your strategy?
I think it's mixed. So I think if you're in the non-scripted, there's kind of cautious optimism, because the conversations we're having, they're seeing the opportunities there. I think we're open for business for good scripted ideas as well. So I think it's really mixed. There are always winners and losers in these kind of decisions, unfortunately.
No, of course. And linear is still very important to your regions, and maybe I think we often take that maybe slightly like US centric or UK centric view on the way the landscape works. But maybe you could talk a bit more about the relationship that people in CEE in particular maybe have with your linear service.
So I think this idea that linear is dead is just simply not true in this part of the world. Right? We don't see cord cutting in a meaningful way. In fact, we see growth in pay TV in some cases. And I also think that consumers are incredibly price sensitive. Back to my comment about there may be space for 3, 4, at best, kind of services. And I think that as we think about the Max launch and rollout, that has to be our mindset. We have to think about, okay, where are the consumers consuming the content? How do we get that to them through partnerships? We're not just going to be going alone with our service. So I think that's the importance of linear, really, that it's not in decline. It's an important part of our partner's business and our business.
Why do you think it's not in decline? Like, what's the difference maybe in a region like this compared to the US, where linear has been declining steadily for a while?
I guess some of it is time. Evolution and time. Things are just on a different timeline. I think that the partners that we deal with in the region have done a really, really good job at making a compelling offer, a pay TV offer, right? And there's really strong free-to-air in the markets as well. So a lot of it, I think, is just the companies that we work with recognizing that threat and doing something about it, frankly. I think that broadband penetration speed is a high factor as well. The question I have is about whether where do linear channels feature in a streaming world as well? We have an asset, for example, in Turkey called Blue TV, and they have linear channels on that service, including our channels, and it gets about 25% of all the viewership is on linear channels in a streaming environment. So I think this is a question for the whole industry to answer: is where do consumers want to see those linear channels in the future, and how are we giving them access to that?
That's really interesting. And how often are you talking to the team in the US about all of this kind of stuff? Are you in regular dialogue?
Yeah, regular. Yeah. I mean, I think lobbying hard.
Yeah.
So I think that the process we're going through at the moment is a good example of it. So the Max is launched in the US, and the idea, the ambition of the company is there is a global product. So what does global product mean? I think from one lens, it means the same everywhere in the world, right? So what we're going through as a process now is the US team's working with all of us in my region, but also in the Nordics and elsewhere, to sort of say, okay, does that model fit? And so, you have to spend a lot of time educating. Like this whole comment around cord cutting not really being a thing, that's something that needs education of the US digital teams. It's just not their experience, right? So a lot of my time, I would say 50% of my time is spent internally trying to, work with and influence and get things kind of clear with our stakeholders.
50%.
Probably 50% at the moment.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. There is a writer's strike taking place in the US. Again, I think it would be remiss if I didn't ask you about it and ask you how you feel it's going to impact the regions that you look after as opposed to the US.
Yeah. I mean, look, day to day, it's not impacting me. I think the company wants to, and other companies want to resolve it as quickly as possible. We need the writers, right? So I think that's the opening part of it. In terms of how it impacts the region directly, I'm a little unsure because I think that there may well be a delay in some of the content that is being produced coming to air, so that will be an impact. But actually, I also always see opportunity in any kind of issue or crisis because, as we were saying earlier, there is still a local production strategy for the region. And so how do we start to tap into that as we maybe have some gaps in the pipeline over the next few months? But at the end of the day, we all want to see great shows. And so the sooner it ends, the better in my mind.
Have you been having those conversations, or has your team been having those conversations with local talent over the past few weeks?
Not really, not yet. I think it's something we will start to do as we get a bit more clarity on how long it might last and the rest of it. So I think we're just kind of waiting at the moment.
There is clearly so much talent around here. But yesterday, Frank Spotnitz, during his keynote, was speaking about this part of the world and about Europe more generally, and talking about how there needs to be more of an instilling of what he described as a core set of values and also practical strategies to improve the quality of production. He was mostly talking through the lens of writing, but he was also talking about production. What do you think about that? How would you respond to those thoughts?
I think there is plenty of great production coming out. Again, I think you look at some of the work that my frame of reference, the HBO work that comes out, has come out of the region over the last years, has incredibly high production values, incredibly great writing. And so I think it's just about, but it is about finding the talent and nurturing it, right? That's the key. So I'm not sure I would entirely agree that it's that bad. I think there's a lot of talent that just needs to be tapped into.
And is that something that you want to actively look to do? Like, how does
I think so. I think the first step is that we need to get, we're in a period of kind of still going through the restructure, figuring out, how it all works together, putting teams together, getting deals done, getting Max launched. So I think it's probably something we'll turn focus on next year. Once Max is up and running in a number of markets, that'll give us the opportunity to sort of revisit the content strategies for the service. Once we know and learn, what we need, frankly.
And do you pay attention to, there's so much strife, even beyond the writer's strike, taking place in the US industry at the moment, with pretty much all the streamers and the studios, even those that we maybe didn't expect to be in this position at this time. So are you sort of very aware of that? Are you paying a lot of attention to that?
I think the whole company does, because I think that the landscape has kind of switched like that in the last sort of 18 months. It was all about subscribers before, right? And that's just not the case now. You can see the pressure that international players get and have got from reporting of their numbers. I saw some stuff, today that's come out from a European streamer. So I think it's just. I think the what success is changing and very rapidly. But that's why I think the companies that have like that ecosystem that I mentioned are better protected. It's not just about the streaming business, right? For us, there's a theatrical business, a consumer products business, you name it. So it gives you a bit of insulation. I think Netflix is maybe the exception to the rule in a way, right? But I think that everyone else, it's the ones with the ecosystem that are going to be the ones that survive. That's my belief, and I think our CEO's belief as well.
Well, thank you so much. We've got 5 seconds left, and it's lunchtime. But thank you. You've got a really clear idea of what you're about.
Cool. Thank you.